Good morning, everybody. And to all of the ladies and gentlemen present over here, welcome to this distinguished gathering for a thought leadership session, a highlight amidst the engaging discussions at the Global Investors Meet 2024. Please, we request our distinguished panelists, speakers to please join us on the dais. Can I have a round of applause as we welcome them on the dais, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you. This session is something where empowerment takes the center stage. Today, we have an extraordinary session ahead with us, which boasts an ensemble of exceptional women CXOs, each a luminary in their respective fields. Before we dive into the heart of this empowering session, let's take a moment to recognize the amazing individuals who have gathered here today with us. Our stage is graced by the presence of remarkable speakers who epitomize excellence in leadership. So if you allow me, ladies and gentlemen, let me take the privilege of introducing to you all of our panelists. Firstly, we have honored Ms. Mallika Srinivasan Madam, a thought leader of exceptional caliber, renowned strategist and devoted philanthropist, and is deeply committed to driving progress in agriculture, industry, trade, education, and healthcare in India. A visionary, as her unrelenting pursuit of excellence and her significant contributions to the Indian agriculture machinery sector and academia have garnered widespread recognition. Currently, she is the chairman and managing director of Tractors and Farm Equipment Limited, the second largest tractor manufacturer, as you all know. Additionally, she holds the esteemed position of the chairperson of the Public Enterprises Selection Board, Government of India, and she led the B20 India Task Force on Inclusive GVCs for Resilient Global Trade and Investment. Her remarkable contributions extends to the boards of prominent organizations and institutions, including Tata's, ISB, and IIT Madras, and Sankar Nethralaya, etc. Ms. Mallika has been honored with several prestigious awards, underscoring her outstanding achievements, including the Global Corporate Leadership Award 2021, by the US India Business Council and Business Women of the Year Award at ET Prime Women Leadership Awards 2020, to name a few. So please put your hands together for Ms. Mallika Srinivasan, Chairman and MD, TEFE. Nextly, we have Ms. Ipsita Dasgupta, is a marketing and strategy leader with a 24-year extensive operating experience across international markets, including US, China, India, and Southeast Asia. Ipsita is a strong advocate for women's empowerment and has been actively involved in gender equality initiatives. She has made significant contributions to several global multinationals, including IBM, Cisco, GE, Star India, and Apple. Can I have a round of applause for Ms. Ipsita Dasgupta, Senior Vice President and Managing Director, HP India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Welcome you, ma'am. And followed by her, we have Ms. Prabha Narasimhan, who has nearly 25 years of rich and varied experience in customer development, consumer marketing, and innovation across geographies and multiple categories, including home care, foods, personal, and skincare. She is credited for leading company's skincare division to a spectacular market-beating growth rate. Please put your hands together for Ms. Prabha Narasimhan, Managing Director and CEO of Colgate-Palmolive, India. And followed by her, nextly we have Ms. Renuka Ramnath, often referred to as Mother of Equities in India. Ms. Renuka Ramnath is a prominent name in the Indian private equity space. She's a founder and CEO of Multiples Asset Management Limited. Prior to founding Multiples Asset, recipient of numerous national and international awards, particularly the Padma Bhushan, the country's third highest civilian award. Very honored to have you as well, ma'am, today with us. So we are missing only Renuka, ma'am, and apart from her, we have the four leaders over here. Thank you so much for joining us. Your presence have made this day even more beautiful. And I leave the stage over to Ms. Mallika Srinivasan, madam, to take over the panel discussion. I think it's going to be an interesting session coming up for you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. Thank you, and a very warm good afternoon to everybody. On behalf of all of us here, a very warm welcome to our panelists. As you just heard, each one here, thank you, each one is an icon of women's empowerment and achievement and inspiration to all women, and really been beacons of light that have made such impactful contributions on both corporates as well as on entrepreneurship. I'm proud to say that when Renuka does join us, and I think the traffic's been super heavy, so she will be here within the next few minutes. So, but let me add to say, I'm proud to say that 3 of them, I don't think Ipsita has had roots in Tamil Nadu, but the other 3 panelists, and if you... Super.
I have a Tamilian husband.
Super. So if you add, and if you add myself, despite being a moderator to this discussion, then all 5 of us. Then all 5 of us have had roots and links to Tamil Nadu, and I think it says volume. It's a real testament to the ecosystem that Tamil Nadu has enabled and nurtured so that folks like us have benefited from it. So thank you, and delighted to have all of you with us this afternoon. I think increasingly and very hearteningly, we've seen the benefits of diversity. And I don't mean just diversity in terms of women or gender, but I'm talking about diversity of thought. Has increasingly has been well acknowledged. Research has shown that the impact on corporates, an impact on GDP, an impact on innovation, engagement, all of these have been extraordinarily well documented and clearly beneficial. I was intrigued with a McKinsey study recently that I saw that also gave a 25% greater probability to women-led corporates to outperform their peers on profitability. So that was very heartening. But nevertheless, we still feel, and I'll jump straight into the topic, we still feel the need for forums like this. We still, and I brought out that just to highlight, that we still feel that there's a focus required, there is some special support that is required, and there's more discussion and engagement of different stakeholders to make this happen. So let me set this a little bit further in terms of context. If you look at the data points, at a global level, board level participation is about 19.7%. Is board level participation, chairman 6.7%, and CEOs at 5%. This is the entire globe. If you look at the participation in the workforce, some of the countries, it's really pretty healthy. And I thought it was stunning to see when I was looking at data points for this, 73% in Kenya, 61% in China, and 53% in Malaysia and Indonesia, and of course Sweden, above 70% in Sweden. Look at the comparative Indian data. India, we are talking about an optimistic estimate. It keeps inching up. Not sure about the veracity of the number, but somewhere between 30 and 35 at an optimistic level, one could put it. Everyone, organized, unorganized, agriculture, industrial, everybody together at a 35%. The board participation looks better, looks comparable, but we must remember it is regulation driven, so it is 17.11%, not that far behind the global benchmark. And then as chairman, then the numbers drop. Then as chairperson, the numbers drop 3.6%, and CEOs 4.7%. So and I think that kind of sets the context itself for why we are having this discussion today. So what are the challenges that we have? In our own context, and I just want to set out the challenges so that we can divide this panel discussion into probably 2 parts and solicit some opinions and ideas from our very, very richly experienced panel members. And the challenges are like this. The first challenge is India seeks to be the number 3 in the world, is certainly heading there. It's heading there. But if we have to get our GDP up and our GDP per capita up at an accelerated rate, the role of women is going to be crucial. Without that, it's going to be a much tougher climb. And I must emphasize, we are in this Global Investors Meet of Tamil Nadu, so I must emphasize, I see some posters here. Unfortunately, this room doesn't talk about the one poster about Tamil Nadu women that is there in many of the other conference rooms. So I will use the data points that yesterday we heard the Chief Minister, we heard the Industries Minister talk about, and I'll touch upon that to say, if it is certainly higher, the participation of women in the overall workforce in Tamil Nadu is much better than the national average. And there are some lessons here. It's much better than national average. Manufacturing participation is pretty low, 10 to 11% if you take across the country. But that was the poster I was looking around for when I was looking that way, is 43%, as Tamil Nadu very proudly presents, of the entire manufacturing workforce is in Tamil Nadu. I think that's really saying something. So there is something in this ecosystem. The benefits, and a number of us have benefited from this, and I'd like to just share some examples. Maybe later I will share that, but I think this holds some insights, and it's worth talking about. What is it that's special about Tamil Nadu that enables this to happen? Does it have insights for us nationally? Does it have insights for us at level of corporates as well? The second two challenges, I talked about three challenges, and I'd perhaps club the next two challenges into one theme to talk about women leadership. And women, I shared some statistics already, women leadership and women entrepreneurship. So everyone hears about the broken rung. The broken rung caused by either societal pressure, maternity, a typical reason for the break, and gender disparity in promotions that impacts the succession pipeline that is available. So if you step back and say, I was reflecting on this, and I want to present this to our panelists as well, that government policy, both at the state and the central level, has been progressive. We've seen education in Tamil Nadu for sure has for decades been in focus. We see a lot of special schemes, maternity benefits, where government has been the benchmark. We see Tamil Nadu mandated creches, for example, and then we have institutional mechanisms, we have training institutes for women, and so on. And internationally, when such institutions have been set up, the impact that they have had in terms of results of participation have been quite good and attributed to those institutions. But that doesn't seem to be the story here. We are still, despite all this, there is still a lot of progress to be made. And here again, I'm actually happy to say that we've had some outstanding leaders from Tamil Nadu. We've had both at a global level, at a national level, and we have a whole range of young entrepreneurs that maybe we'll talk about a little later as well. And I want to, as a going-in hypothesis, I want to put down 3 points that perhaps have really contributed to this in the Tamil Nadu context. One, it's a very progressive society. It's a progressive society which, for multi-decadal emphasis on inclusion and equality. These have been two very strong pillars, it in large measure driven by our socio-political movements that have happened in the state that have focused on inclusion and equality. And then I will take some credit for the large corporate houses, and I will say this on behalf of the encouragement that I've received personally also from my family, to say that large business houses have been very enlightened in terms of encouraging their young women to join the business and play a leadership role. And I think that has a kind of a ripple effect in terms of being inspiring for MSMEs and a bunch of other women entrepreneurs who also benefit from that. And I think the third is that the whole emphasis with the policy bit that I already touched upon. All this together has given us a nice ecosystem. So are there some lessons to be learned? And other aspects, the role of the self, the role of venture capitalists in funding women. All our panelists here have very rich experience. They're all active, and I had a very brief conversation with them coming into this panel. All of them very actively involved in mentorship, in interventionist approaches, in promotion, in social change, etc. So let me stop there and request each of our panelists, and the way we'll structure this, we'll do it in two broad themes. First, for the overall just general participation in the workforce, and then we'll come in the second half to leadership and entrepreneurship, to give their maybe a minute or two to talk about your broad ideas, your experiences, and what you would like to see as a way going forward. We'll try to keep this interactive, intersperse it with some questions amongst ourselves, and at the end, of course, open it up for the audience for question and answers. So who would like to go first? Sita, would you like to go first? I mean, I just made eye contact with you, so I thought, why not ask her to go first? Go ahead.
So the first question you're asking, Mallika, is around what corporates can do?
Anything, whatever. Your broad views on labor force participation. We do lag behind, so
yeah.
Why? What can be done? Anything corporates can do? Just broad ideas.
So it's interesting because I moved to India about 15 years ago, and 15 years ago we were having the same conversation, and the workforce participation for women was about 23-24%. So as Mallika was saying, we've moved up, but we're still far behind the rest of the world. And in my mind, there are three sort of broad buckets in which the issue sort of kind of finds itself, right? One is the one we can't ignore at all, which is society and the personal environment that women are in. And I find, if I look across the parts of the world that I've worked in, I've lived in 9 countries, the level to which stakeholders in an Indian woman's life can have an opinion on what an Indian woman does is more than almost any other society I've ever seen. And that is a huge factor. If you can imagine, I mean, you think about, that is bureaucracy in a person's life, right? Like, if you have to make sure that everyone from your in-laws to your parents to your neighbors to your spouse to your children are okay with the choices that you make in your professional life, it's a huge thing. So one, I think we need to think about the way in which we help women deal with this level of stakeholder management, right? I'll talk a little bit later about an example that I talk about from earlier days in another company of what we did in terms of bringing the mother-in-law in and actually sort of, and in fact, I'll give the example right now. We were looking at women engineers and finding that they were having a hard time staying in the workforce. And when we started talking to them about why they were leaving when they were getting married, still when you have a child, you have a reason, right? You have to look after a child. But when you get married, unless your spouse is also sitting at home all day, why do you leave the workforce, right? And when we were looking into it, we were finding that people were saying, look, the men I work with, when they're at work, if they're late and they come home late, nobody gets upset with them. If I get home late, then I have a house of people who are fairly upset. And most upset is my mother-in-law because she has taken over the work that I was going to do in the home, right? Was serve dinner, whatever else is going on. And so a few of the younger women came up with this really good idea where we created a mother-in-law day, where we invited mothers-in-law in specifically into our R&D centers to see what their daughters-in-law did, right? And this was at GE, and so we showed them that they actually helped reduce infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates. So the idea of you are freeing up another woman, and by doing that, you are adding to society, right? And the impact was huge. And so, I tell this story where this young woman came into my office a few days later and said, "This is amazing. I got home late from work the other day, and I was expecting a tense household. And my mother-in-law turned to my husband and said, 'Get up and make her a cup of tea. You just work in a bank. She's saving lives.'" So, we can convert stakeholders. We have to think about how to manage stakeholders, right? I'll talk about just one more aspect, and then I'll let other people talk. Then the other thing is in the workplace, right? And in the workplace, I think we have to be unabashed in recognizing the talent that exists with women. There is still this view, whether you're a woman leader or a male leader, that you cannot, that you somehow have bias if you allow a woman to move forward or you encourage ambition. And the truth is, we have as many women graduating from our engineering schools and our medical colleges and all our universities. So there isn't an intellect problem. There is actually just the lack of opportunity, and there's the lack of sort of confidence that we're giving women to have that level of ambition. So my view is that, and I see it with the women on this panel, that we need to be unabashed about helping to make women successful and then identifying the problems within the workspace, right? And I'll give one quick example, anecdote there. Whenever I have started in a new organization, I do roundtables with women across all levels to just understand what their experiences are. And one of the stories I heard was from a new mother who said, "I don't know how I can ever win, because if I leave work at 7 or 8 p.m. to get home to my child, I'm accused by my colleagues of, behind my back, the conversation is, she gets to go home early because she's a mom. We also have kids. Now, if I stay late, the conversation behind my back is, what a horrible mother. So who am I supposed to be, right? And these are things that we need to address as people who have lived more, have more experiences, are more senior, to say, you actually just ignore it and you move on. But just some thoughts there.
Perfect. If I can push the concept just one step further, build around the thoughts that you were talking, Ipsita, to say, you talked about mothers-in-law, you talked about saying when you're children, it's more understandable when you have children. So what is it that communities can do in order to support children or young children, families with young children, mothers with young children, early age? What is it that communities or corporates can do to help during that phase?
You want to come back to me or
Yeah,
give? So I think the starting point there is getting men more involved. I know this sounds strange, but in helping a man have more time for their home, you're freeing up a woman who may not be your employee. So I think one starting point is that. I see more and more men come to me and say, I need to take half a day off because I have to take my kids to a doctor's appointment. I have to get them their vaccinations. Things that 15 years ago or 10 years ago I wasn't hearing. I was only hearing from the women. So one, I think, is encouraging that. And I'll give you an example. There's a factory that had built a creche to have women come in and leave their children so they could work in the factory and increase participation. And the interesting thing that happened is they found that most of the women that worked for them were under the age of 24 and didn't have children, even if they were married. But sooner or later, the men started using the creche. So they were bringing their children in because the creche was excellent facilities, and suddenly there is no child in the house for that 8-hour shift or that 6-hour shift, right? So I think there's an opportunity to free up time for a woman to do something outside of the house by creating more policies around men. I think the other thing that we need to do is I think we need to listen really carefully to what's happening. I mean, one of my sort of pet peeves, I believe very strongly in having a women's network, and I believe very strongly in having environments where women can talk to each other and sort of talk about things that are important. financial independence, ambition, trends. We talked about this, Mallika, the other day. Yeah. It really bothers me when I look at a women's network agenda for the month.
Running that unit. And I can say with a great sense of pride that the engagement is the highest engagement score in the company. Quality is 0 ppm, productivity is high, and there's 0 absenteeism. And they worked throughout the COVID, making masks and making new products for different factories. So we know this is very well documented. Some have been able to do it. So I'd like your comments on what are your thoughts about labor force participation, what makes that successful, and what are some of the challenges that we are seeing, how can we address them?
So thanks, Mallika, and thanks for having me on this panel. I think I wanted to just actually firstly step back from an FMCG industry perspective and just talk about the fact that most decisions on what is bought is made by women. So it's utterly bizarre that the people who are producing it and the people who are deciding what the advertising is or what the quality is or what the product is doesn't have a fair representation of women. And I think we are obviously realizing that as we get that balance right, results like you've pointed out on the shop floor or anywhere else tend to improve. I think if I could just build on the couple of things that Ipsita said and maybe add one more. One of the things I do think that women need to do better is to enlist the support of the men in their lives. And I think the men are also waiting for that support to be taken. Most of the men that I know love to be fathers. They would love to have more time with their children. They would love to do a lot of the things that erstwhile would have been thought as being only a female domain. And I think we're just maybe not giving them an opportunity because equally as we are typecasting women to being the homemaker, we are typecasting the man saying you must be ambitious, you must be at work till the last person leaves, you must be working harder than everybody else, and you can't say PTA. You can't say child has a cold and today's my day to stay at home or I'm going to take half a day off because my child has half a day off and we desperately want to see the Avengers movie. I think we need to be able to give the men in our lives a little bit of space to do that, and I think we will start getting a little bit more sharing there as well, and that whole thinking will start changing because it is a privilege to be a parent. Rather than seeing it as just the burden of being a parent. The last piece I do want to touch upon, though, is safety. I think for us to get better labor participation or just women in the workforce, we must have a society that is safer. We must have public transport that's able to take them to and from their places of work or some other way to get to and from, and the ability to do things like night shifts, for example, because again, you will have a conversation that says, why do all the men do the night shifts and why can't women do night shifts as well? And of course they can, but the minute you make the entire society safer, I think we again open up the opportunities for doing that. So that would be kind of my top of mind thoughts on this.
So before I come with a question, I see a lot of men in this room. So I'm going to ask the men in this room to say how many of you would like to spend more time with your children or your grandchildren. And we're going to see every man's hand up. So that's going to be, and the women are going to applaud that. Huh? So why don't you give them a round of applause for that? Because we need to really get them engaged. I can tell you in my house, it is certainly a fight for when Tata can have his time. I'm not sure it is so when the children were growing up. Certainly so when the grandchildren are growing up. So on that note, let me come back to you with a question. So there was an interesting piece of research that the Gates Foundation put out, which talked about working women spend a little over 4 hours, 4.1 to 4.2 was the precise data in terms of working at home, even though they were working, whereas the men spend 0 to 0.4 hours per day doing work. Hi Renuka, welcome. We appreciate the traffic. So just relax, and we are only on theme 1 about getting the workforce participation up. So, and we already did the introduction about you earlier before you joined. So this question therefore refers to how can we address this gap? This 4 hours when women are spending doing work at home in addition to being working women, whereas the men are spending 0.4. So how do we address that? And you are a living example of how you've managed that. So I'm going to pose that question to you.
So I'm going to start actually with a little story during the pandemic where we were virtually meeting a whole lot of our consumers, and I used to handle a dishwash brand at the time. And so we were asking the woman, what are your aspirations and what do you want to do? And she was talking about that, some of that stuff. And then we went on to ask her, but don't you want to go outside, and don't you want to work, and don't you want to do more? Because she was a homemaker. And she looked at us and she goes, how many times have you ever asked a man in one of these discussions, doesn't he want to do more stuff at home? Why is it that we always ask women saying, you want to be a homemaker, you want to be a mom, you want to be a daughter-in-law, you want to be great at work, you want to be very talented at craft? We're asking them to do an awful lot. And actually that comment from this consumer, middle-class lady from Indore in her 30s, and she was super clear. She was like, this is my job, that's his job, and we're quite okay with it. But however, when you do have a chance where women want to go out and work, I think the sharing the load or getting household chores to be done in a manner that is much more equitable than now is something that deserves a conversation. And if I may, I must confess that the only reason I'm able to do this job and many other jobs that I've done in the past is because a lot of the heavy lifting as far as managing the home is concerned is actually done by my husband. And if he didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to do this.
So that was a round of applause for her husband.
I'm definitely not telling him, so I hope he doesn't see this.
Yes, we will. We will when we get the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you, Prabha, for coming over to Suchitra. Suchitra, would you like to give your going-in comments on you? I know you're very passionate about women in STEM. So would you like to comment on women in STEM, whatever you are seeing among your researchers? Any comments, thoughts for enhancing participation?
Malika, I grew up a little different, so I probably what applies to me even back then, 50 years ago, I think still is so true to what I'm doing today. I really give it to my parents, and of that, my father, because it was he who would just stand up and say, go do everything there that a boy is doing in your classroom or in your school or outside, wherever it is, whether you are in the Girl Scouts or in the Boy Scouts and Guides or the NCC, take responsibility and don't just say that this is not my job and just don't back off. So I think I just wanted to start off by saying that because society is not external, but society for us starts at home. And I think our parents and our grandparents become the first driving forces that we all experience initially in those formative years. And of course, the teachers and later on, the mentors that we have as we progress into higher levels of learning. Right now, coming back to where I am today, so that probably left me with a boundaryless brain. So I don't know if many of my interviews to the press, I have reporters and journalists and media personnel asking me, how is it that you are a woman and what do you think that, how do you see entrepreneurship as? I said, wait a minute, entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship, whether it's male or female. There is no gender genderization in entrepreneurship because it's the same product or it's the same idea, it's the same technology, the same management practices, finances, marketing, whatever you call it. I mean, people skills, management, everything. So everything is the same and you have to work with teams. So where is the question of he and she coming in entrepreneurship? It is just the same. So I think if a man can get up and say that he has an idea and he would like to try going about, talking about it, and then drawing, resources for it, I think the women also should be able to do the same thing. I just don't want that factor that being a woman should limit that professional or potential entrepreneur to take a step back and say that, hey, I can't do this. This is not for me. This is not my cup of tea. So that basic mindset is all that we first have to erase completely from our minds. Coming to STEM, when we came back to India in 1996, I spent about 14 years in the United States with Krishna. And Renuka knows us too well since those days. When we came back, Krishna was employee number 1. And guess who was employee number 2? That was me. So I said, this is how I need to set an example in an organization that both of us envisioned to build, to create. Because we started from scratch. In those days, let me tell you, the women were not allowed to come into the second shift. And my facilities were not in parts of the city or in certain areas which is very, the infrastructure is good. We were about 40 kilometers outside of the city of Hyderabad, and that would mean a commute of more than 45 minutes even back in those days. So the second shift was not there. So here we are with the government trying to tell them about how the biotech industry, the life sciences industry, the pharmaceutical industry is all about processes and continuous process happens. There's no stoppage 24/7. And so we had to really talk and work on that kind of a starting point where our women were not allowed to come into the second shift. But today that's a different story. We've had women, as Malika pointed out, and some of my other panelists, where the pandemic went back to show that it didn't matter whether you are, what gender you bring to the table. We were all together 24/7 at the facilities, non-stop. And not a single woman came and said, why should I come? My mother-in-law told me not to go because of all the COVID protocols. I mean, here we are, quite a strong, capable, confident organization in creating technology platforms for multiple pathogens that we have around us. But still the women came back and said that nobody stopped them. Even their housing, the colonies and the cooperatives and the associations that they belong to said that go to your work and, do what the best that you can bring about in, bringing such kind of life-saving technologies. So the women were there, and many of them, I was surprised, they said, can we come on the second shift? I said, why? Don't you want to come here early in the morning at 6 and leave by 2 or whatever, 2 or 2:30? They said, no, because they said, I don't have to be losing my daytime that I would have to come here because the work didn't matter. It was the same amount of processes and production and quality and all that which has to take place 24/7. So they said it doesn't matter. They all opted to come for the second shift. They were there from 2 to 10. So they said, we get up in the morning, we could do whatever we need to do so that the children and the families, the elders especially, if those of them needed medical support and care and all that, everything was taken care of because it is still, to a large extent, the women who have to, you put your foot forward, even if they tell you back off. Sometimes it's just that instinct in us, that's probably nature that is given us. And we feel that we are the best multitaskers in the world, and we don't let the men come in. Sometimes it happens too, right? So I think many of them felt that it was important that they stayed that little few hours in the morning, finished whatever they need to do for their families, for the children, anybody, and then left for work. And they were not bothered about going back home at midnight. And this was, believe me, all through the pandemic. 2021, I think 2 full complete years, 24 months, these women, most of them, 80% of them, were going back home at midnight. And to tell you just one little short anecdote, I said, weren't you a little feeling uncomfortable because you were not used to this? Most of you were coming in first shifts and general shifts, and now you all chose to come in the second shift. And I said, how are you dealing with this? Though we had our logistics and our transportation up to B2C, in spite of that, they said, not at all, Mrs. Ella. I said, how come? Because the roads were deserted. There was nobody on the streets. And it was not the normal, night, at least even until 10 or 11, sometimes in certain neighborhoods. There's quite a bit of traffic. People said, no, we have the cops standing out there on our streets. And they felt very comfortable, in fact, by saying that the cops would not leave until they saw these buses from Bharat Biotech roll into those streets, drop off these women at the corner of the street, because obviously some of the buses couldn't get into the front of the gate. But they said that the cops were staying there until these women entered their homes. So that was such a kind of a relief to many of them as well. So nothing held them back from coming to work. If push comes to shove, I think gender doesn't matter. So it all comes back to what is it that we are faced to do and how we would like to go about doing that, given the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think those women of Bharat Biotech at a time, like what Chitra was just talking about, she didn't touch upon this, but I'd like to give it an added dimension to say they were also, I am sure, motivated by the fact that they were at a very crucial point and they were saving lives. They were saving lives, and I'm sure a number of you here have benefited from the Covaxin and from the efforts of all of those women. So thank you to those women there. And Renuka, thank you for joining us. And Renuka and I have known each other a long time, and I know we've had many conversations on this topic. So I'm going to go right in, since Renuka didn't get an opportunity for round one, to just go right in with a subject that that Suchitra already led us into on entrepreneurship. But I'll pick it up from there to go to our second theme that we wanted to talk about, women leadership and entrepreneurship. And one of, Renuka, your theme has been, to me at least in personal conversation, that women don't aspire enough. That has been towards leadership and towards entrepreneurship. And when I asked her once, I said, how about you're funding women entrepreneurs? The answer I had from Renuka was that I don't see enough. I want to see more so that I can fund. So her observation has been that they don't aspire enough. So we'd like to hear your insights, your observations on women in leadership and how can we build that? Your thoughts.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Malika, for accommodating me. This is the most stressful half an hour I had in my life. But real pleasure to be here in Chennai. Now, getting into the topic of women in leadership and women in entrepreneurship. Now, even today, right, the statistics on women in leadership is single-digit number. In financial services, which is a very woman-friendly sector, right? I mean, we have had RBI deputy governors, women, 25 years back. We have had many, many women in banking and other allied financial services. But even today, the women in leadership in financial services is only 15%. When I dug into some numbers for this event, and I was myself quite unpleasantly surprised. I'm not sure, I've not done enough of that in my workplace. Whenever I have an ill-defined job, I would be more comfortable to hand it over to a woman than a man. They are very, very capable of handling ambiguity, but I feel they stop shy of taking the risk, putting the neck on the line, holding out their opinion and saying, this is how we need to lead this initiative, lead this organization, or lead this business. Probably somewhere in the back of the mind, they worry about how much time they can commit. They worry about if they turn out a failure, whether they'll be able to justify to themselves. This is again just my personal hypothesis, that because of these years of conditioning, there is always a little bit of guilt we leave our homes from when we go to work as a woman, no matter in what position you are in. I like to believe that when your child is ill, the mother will feel little more guilty than the father even today to leave the house. So when you are leaving the house to pursue your passion, your career, at the very minimum, you want to tell yourself that I am successful. And if by chance the choices that you make turn out to be a failure, your guilt will kind of really consume you. And therefore, probably they navigate their life around, what will give them the assurance that they will not fail. And that's the only thing I can think
So
of.
this is, you'd mentioned a lot about conditioning and risk averse. So would you like to share with the audience maybe an instance where you have taken risk? You take risks on a daily basis. You place bets on a daily basis, and we place our bets on Renuka. It's very simple, because she invests for everyone, and so we place our bets on Renuka. Renuka places the bets in the market. Yeah. So she talks about being risk averse. So please tell us a little bit about your dealing with risk.
Yeah. So I do not know how I got comfortable with taking risk. My business is only about assuming risk. And Malika, it was interesting. I got my team to dig into the details to see how many women-led firms are there in the world who do the business that I do, which is private investing. It's a princely number of 2% globally. There are only 2% women-led firms in my business globally. So for our business, the percentage of women in senior position is a very small single-digit number. But again, speaking to the nature of the business, which is all about, taking risk. So what has motivated me personally, right from my childhood, is I will decide what I want to get, and I will really not bother about how difficult the road is. My mind and my eyes are set only in the goalpost, and everything else I will manage along the way. And especially the way we define for ourselves should not be a deterrent. And how do you train yourself, for that? How do you train yourself that seeking your passion, wanting to do what you want to do, whether you are a woman or a man, is the right thing to do. And just because I'm a woman, I will not subserve my passion, my interest, my desire to other things. But equally, I am not a feminist or some kind of activist person. You cannot imagine a more family-oriented person than me. It is a question of organizing, and I've seen that about Malika also, in our interactions. We've never compromised our family. Equally not compromised our career, right? So you have to partner people around you. I will tell you a hilarious story. I had to go for a surgery for myself, and the hospital required that I should get admitted by 6 p.m. And I was already CEO of ICICI Venture, and this was a bit unplanned in the sense I had postponed it to the point that I couldn't postpone anymore. So I didn't have too much time to prepare. So in a week's time, I kind of chose the date. And unfortunately, on the day I was to get admitted, there was a bereavement of a very close family member. So I had to go and attend there. So I lost 2-3 hours there, and I had to make up. But hospital rule required that I get admitted. I admitted my secretary. She was sitting there. And when the doctor and other attendants came, she said, no, I'm not the patient. And they said, we have never experienced this in 100 years of our history. I said, welcome to Renuka's world, right? So you've got to partner people around, and you've got to find solutions for your own situation. Imagining that others haven't done it and therefore I cannot do it out, this is the only way it will happen, will be a very constraining, kind of mindset. And once you set your goal, you make that clear to your family, and your children, your spouse, and you're quite determined that to walk this path, this is the support system I need. No task is impossible. And with every passing year, I would say that the support is only more. So I would ardently kind of encourage women to take risk and be comfortable with it, because not taking risk is the biggest risk we assume actually.
Thank you. And before we open up and I make some concluding remarks and open up, I want one quick kind of rapid fire question to all of you, because what's emerging from the world around us in a multi-stakeholder kind of environment? You want to start, Chitra? Just go down the line. Very, very short comment, and then I'll open it up.
I think just don't stop the girl from going through her set of passions. Let her not live for passions that others have built. But I think it's important that as a system, the environment around has to let her be, irrespective of success or failure, and just don't judge her by, what she has. She need not stereotype. Just let her be. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to combine something Prabha said earlier about building a pact with people around you, and what Renuka said about failure, and the fact that it's necessary for success. I would say women need co-conspirators. They need people who will conspire. The world conspires. Prabha was talking about this earlier. And sometimes
One deep desire I have is if all state governments can look at the curriculum right from school. I feel every story, every imagery, every picture, every moral has to be changed. And this mindset change has to happen from very, very young years. It's not that the mother will cook and father will go to office. Mother will do craft, father will solve math problems. If there is a money problem at home, it is only the father's issue. I think we've got to demolish all of this. Family is one unit. Let the better person do better things. If father is better in drawing and mother is better in math, let them just do that job and do good for the family. Like today, my son cooks at home. My daughter-in-law can only bake. She cannot cook. And even for a person like me, when my grandson says, Dada made yummy breakfast for me, for a minute it just feels odd to me that, so we are all victims of these years of conditioning, and we've got to break it at the grassroots level, at a very young age. And whether it is TV shows, whether it is stories in storybooks or in curriculum, it has to change. And we have to say, let the right person do the right job, whether it is a man or a woman.
Thank you. And I'll add my own suggestion to the social transformation. I think we've seen extraordinary examples of private-public participation and public infrastructure. An outstanding example is our own digital public infrastructure that has transformed the way we work in this country. On a similar basis, I think if we had quality childcare as a public infrastructure, that would go a very, very densely populated quality childcare. That would go a very long way in really bringing about the participation and the transformation that's required. So that's my own bit to that. And let me just pull that together as some concluding remarks and then open up for question and answers. I think we've heard today about government policy that is playing a very, very good and progressive role, and my special compliments to the Tamil Nadu government for the policy and the ecosystem that we have built over decades that has enabled this participation in the workforce. So government is doing its bit by and large. Center or state is doing its bit. Today we have seen a number of excellent suggestions that have come up. We heard about infrastructure enhancement for women, the public infrastructure, the toilets, the transportation, etc. We heard about vocational education. We heard about women in STEM. We heard about mentorship. We heard about childcare. We talked about educational curriculum, the transformation of the educational curriculum, and perhaps maybe if I will take the liberty of extending that to parenting as well, and say not just education, but certainly parenting. And what can corporates do? Mentorship programs, she-focused programs, and we heard some examples of don't focus just on traditional roles that women play, but let's focus our programs on empowerment of women, because by economic empowerment alone can we nibble away at the most important change that will enhance participation, leadership, and entrepreneurship, which was the last point that we stressed upon, is social transformation. So economic empowerment and social transformation as the route to really the faster growth of women across the board, in participation, leadership, as well as in entrepreneurship. So as we
Malika,
open,
with your permission,
Sure.
just one very positive point that as a person from the financial field I would like to bring is the microfinance and the revolution that it has brought about in self-employed women. So in our country, we have disbursed about 4 lakh crores in microfinance. About 7 crore families have benefited greatly from women empowerment in microfinance.
Super.
And we've got to now take the women's confidence in taking responsibility for others' money, others' career, others' jobs as well. Yeah.
And as an allied point, Renuka, picking up from there, is I think the very enlightened approach towards self-help groups initiated by many corporates that has really played a very transformative role if we're talking about social transformation and certainly microfinancing, and that are fairly. Tamil Nadu is a leader in that, and a number of CSR organizations and the government have. Yes, everybody's, you can see we're all bursting with ideas here, and I'm sure there are enough number of questions, but I am going to keep this really short and rapid with this so we can give an opportunity to our audience.
I just wanted to add from the sector that I come from, the life sciences, it's completely knowledge driven. So don't, let us not stereotype these women and the workforce that we have in my organization. We have broken certain glass ceilings. I'm so proud to be sitting here in front of you to admit that my research director is Dr. Sumati.
Super.
It's led by a woman. And this is not just, I'm not talking, she's not doing theoretical science, but, this is her team and her entire group of scientists. Just look at the molecular biology and look at how new antigens and new pathogens have to be dealt with. My head of production in one of the important viral vaccines that we make for India and for the rest of the world is led by a woman leader. She is the head of production on a production floor, which is completely GMP, and it's like entering into a zone which you are not comfortable at all, being there 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day. So there are many such areas, because this is all knowledge. We are in a knowledge economy right now, and the future is going to be like that. We need to build upon the knowledge and the skill set that each one of them can personally contribute, and also take themselves forward in their careers and also serve the organization, but more than that, serve the country at large. I think by depriving these roles and responsibilities to some of these extremely pursuant and talented women, I think we are doing ourselves great injustice, and by doing so to the country as well. Thank you.
Thank you. As we look to showcase more and more of these stories that we heard about, and as we do more communication, propagation in a multi-stakeholder approach, we look forward to making great progress in the area. Let me open it up to some Q&A before I do a formal thanks to the government. Yeah. Would you like to pass that mic around, please? If you have someone specific that you're addressing it to, I think we'll have time for only about 3 or 4 questions. So keep your question really short, and I'm going to tell our panelists to keep their answers also very short.
Sure. Hi, ma'am. It was a great session. Me and my wife, we run a mental health company. We both are chartered accountants. So we're a team of 85, and 82 of us are women in the company. So it's called the Mind Run Company. So I just need one help in this. So when we go and networking with people, sometimes my wife and the team members face harassment from bureaucrats. So from people of power. So how do we deal with it? How do I tell my wife to get through that, or the team members? So how do we get through that?
That's a very difficult question because the whole definition, you had us all spellbound over there. Because I think the whole definition of harassment itself, first we have to dwell upon. And we do need to address that perhaps case to case, and there may not be a formula answer. You will see prejudices in many places. Starting not just, let's not isolate bureaucrats, I think that's unfair. I think it's all over the place, right up to the biggest corporate boardrooms. So you will face that, and I think with patience, with a little bit of patience, and to me the one trick, and I'll take that question a bit personally to say, the one trick that has it's not a trick, it's a habit, is to stay calm. To stay calm and very careful with the use of language. If you do that, I think most often.
So I think it's really important to push. One of the things that I really push when I'm in a women's forum speaking, if you have a medical degree or an engineering degree or any kind of degree, you've taken that seat. So when you decide to stay home, not forced by anyone, that seat could have gone to somebody else who would have gone out and contributed to society, right? So I just think, I really feel that it's very important for, at least in stages in women's lives, to have that flexibility, but to show up in the environments where decisions are made.
Sorry, if I could maybe just borrow Malika's philosophy and add one word to it. I think it's a little bit about balance, which is being there in the moments that matter and having the flexibility in the moments that matter. And I think most organizations are certainly seeing the value of being able to do that, and they don't want to lose good talent just because you're not there 100% of the time.
Yeah, but I want to just add one thing to that, right? It's very difficult. I mean, I'll just use the medical environment as an example. It's very difficult to be a surgeon and not show up. I don't want all women to become a profession that would allow them to be the kind of doctor that only has to show up for 2-3 hours, right? So just not to make the decision ahead of time, and to lean in the moments that we have to.
Thanks.
Can I say something? I think it's post-pandemic. What changed? Nothing changed, right? I think there's all the more need for us to lean forward, jump in, take those roles and responsibility, the challenges rather, not even, forget about the roles and responsibilities. I think the challenges that came up because of the pandemic and the opportunities that showed up as well. So I think if half of us felt that we could sit at home or take part-time jobs, aren't we kind of like, I don't know, where are we going? Forward or backward? And I think I love this number. India is one of those very, very, very few countries in the world. We have 500 million plus women in this country. Can we put that to good use, please? I don't wish to see an India, not enabling her own women to be out there in the workforce and contribute to this economy and to the growth of this country. As Malika pointed out earlier, we're talking about the third largest economy and all that global things that are floating around us. But if all of us started if most of us, at least some of us, started looking at not being able to contribute to that, then where does that take us? Forward or backward? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question.
Thanks, Malika, for moderating this panel for us. This question is to you. Leading a family business has its own advantages and disadvantages, how much ever you have been creative and innovative in it. I would like to know how you have treated failure and failure has treated you.
So I don't know if it has anything to do with family business. It has everything to do with failure and how it has treated you, and that's all part of the experience. there's a saying that if you don't have a major failure before you are 40, then you're not going to be a good leader. So we have to take it. We have to take it. That's par for the course. You've got to take that. It'll come. It'll come. We have to face it. It makes us stronger. It makes us wiser, stronger, hopefully calmer. So I think we just have to take that in our stride. It's got really nothing to do with family business. Anybody in any leadership business, family business has only the additional dimension of having to manage a lot more stakeholders than you would otherwise imagine. So that's the only difference. So absolutely, I'm getting like alarm bells from this side. So that's the last question, please.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk offline. We're happy to stay back and talk. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm a student. So my question is open to the panel. What would your advice or message be for female students who are graduating and are entering the workforce?
Anybody else wants to take this question?
I think you're really lucky. This is a fantastic time to be graduating in this country.
Yes.
Go out there and just make your dreams happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, before I hand back to Nancy, on behalf of all of us at the panel, my thanks to the Tamil Nadu government and to the Tamil Nadu guidance for such a fantastic 2 days that we've been having very thought-provoking discussions. Thank you so much. You've been great. And a bubble of energy. Please stand up. We want to showcase one of our female leaders who put this together for us. So big hand, big round for her. She did a lot of work for the gym and made sure each of us was here to participate in this conference. So thank you. And we look forward to Tamil Nadu and the Tamil people being thought leaders and torch bearers when it comes to women's empowerment. Thank you.